Hey investor friends, I'm Michelle Markey and I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing to my video and YouTube channel because today I've curated for you legendary investor Warren Buffett's advice that will change your financial future for the better, where he talked about how to get ahead in the financial game of life and also how to go about paying off student loans so that you can get ahead financially. And then also you may have won the ovarian lottery if you were lucky to have been born in the US or are able to work in the US like Warren Buffett did, because out of all the births in the world, there's 140 births globally, and of that, there's 3.6 million births in the US recently, and that's about a 2.5% chance of being born in the US, or 40-to-1 odds, as Buffett talks about. So there's a lot we have to be grateful for if we have the opportunity to be in the US from all of the opportunities that are afforded to us. So be sure to take advantage of all of the opportunities that can help you and your family get ahead. So let's get into his talk.
What are the best ways for youth to get started now in securing their financial future?
Well, it's not very complicated. It goes back to getting full use out of your own talents first. I mean, the difference between whether you're going to be earning X or 2X or 3X a year 20 years from now is going to be a function of how well, not how much talent you have, but how well you use the talents you already have. And so that is your best financial future is your own ability and your capacity to use those abilities to their potential. And that can't be taken away from you. They can't even tax it. I mean, most things, if you own a piece of real estate, if they double the taxes, they double the taxes, and that changes your ownership in the property, because now, in effect, the taxing authorities own more of it because they've got a greater command on the revenue stream. The same thing about almost any asset you have, but they don't tax what's in your head, and they don't tax your ability to start performing when you get to work in the morning and finish in the evening to your potential. One of the things that amazes me is how people who really do perform well just sort of jump out at you once you're running a business. When I got out of school, I thought, everybody would behave that way, but they don't. Most people sort of go through life in a sleepwalk, and if you don't, you will stand out. So the biggest thing for your financial future is yourself. Now, beyond that, it is always being ahead of the game rather than getting behind the game. It's saving a little, no matter how you do it. I mean, I delivered papers, I worked at Penny's, I sold golf balls, I had a pinball machine around. I did a lot of things that enabled me to accumulate about $10,000 by the time I got out of school. 10,000 doesn't go as far now as it did then, but having anything so that you're ahead of the game and not getting behind the game is enormously important. I mean, just, if you're going to run a 100-yard dash against a bunch of people in life, if you can figure it out so that when the gun goes off, you're 10 or 15 yards ahead instead of 10 or 15 yards behind, it's going to make an enormous difference in how that race comes out. So having some net resources doesn't make much difference whether they're in stocks or bonds, in my view, but and not having debt when that gun goes off when you get out of school is a huge plus over being behind the game. And it may come from delivering a paper out in the morning, it may come from part-time work someplace, but put aside a few dollars for yourself so that when the time comes and you enter the workforce, you're ahead of the game and not behind. And then once you get there, don't get behind by buying a whole lot of things that you figure you're going to pay for someday while you're paying 20% interest in between.
I was wondering, with the increasing costs of education today, what can students do to deal with their debts once they're out of college?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, I guess I'd pay it off as fast as I could, and I would incur as little debt as possible before that time came. And I would say this, in my experience in business, there is very little difference, if any, between a very high-priced business education and what's available for a lot less money. So I went to the University of Nebraska at Lincoln my last year in college. I went to Wharton for a couple of years before that. I learned just as much at the University of Nebraska as I did at Wharton. And there's nothing against Wharton. I mean, it's just we had a very good school here. I had some terrific professors at Lincoln. And so I would not assume that if I was paying a few $1,000s for an education here in the state, for example, versus paying huge amounts elsewhere, that it was going to make a lot of difference. A lot of the education you need to be prodded in the right direction, but an awful lot of it is self-taught. I mean, Andrew Carnegie did a wonderful thing in this country in terms of libraries, and I used to spend a lot of time at libraries. I even got locked in at the University of Omaha, what was then the University of Omaha, and I couldn't get out for hours, and one night I got so entranced with what I was reading. But there's all kinds of information available. Now with the internet, it's so much, easier than it was then. So it's out there to be taken. And it isn't necessary to pay $30,000 or $35,000 a year to go to some big name school to get the education at all. I mean, if you're going to learn accounting, which is probably the most important course you'd take in business, if you're going to learn accounting, you can learn accounting absolutely as well, in my view, going to UNO as going to Harvard. I mean, I see, I'd bet on that. And so I wouldn't run up huge bills in terms of getting a business education. Now, if you're going to get a medical education, I mean, there's certain professions where there may not be any way around spending a fair amount of money and getting in debt to some degree. You've got to make that decision yourself, but I'd certainly try to minimize it. And I would have it figured out how I would handle that debt in, say, a 5-year period after I got out of school, or I would think twice about incurring it.
Would you not acknowledge your success more on yourself or from the help and teachings of others?
Well, I was very lucky in life. If you tell me who your heroes are, I will make a pretty good prediction about what you're going to do. And I had the right heroes. I was very lucky in life, and my heroes never let me down, and started with my dad, and then I had others in business. And so I have had great teachers, some formal teachers, some that were just informal teachers by instinct or example. And if I hadn't had those, my life, I'm sure, would have been very different. If I'd been born anyplace else. When I was born in 1930, and at the time, 1 out of 50 births in the world were in the United States. So I came in against 50 to 1 odds against being born in the United States. I would have been a disaster, if I'd been born in Afghanistan or Peru or someplace. I mean, I was extraordinary. I won the lottery the day I was born, by being born in this country. So have you. The odds were probably 40 to 1 against you being born in this country, and they were 5 times more likely to have been born in China, or 6 times, or 4 or 5 times more likely to have been born in India or some other place where it would not have been as easy to exploit the full potential of your talent. So we've all won the lottery in that respect, and that's just plain luck. I mean, and I was lucky to be born at this time. I mean, capital allocation is something that pays off extremely well in this society now, but it doesn't pay off in other societies, and it didn't pay off, many years ago. My friend Bill Gates says that if I had been born a few thousand years ago, I'd have been some animal's lunch. I can't run very fast, and I can't climb trees, and I just happen. Those are talents. Nobody asked me to climb trees now, but there was a time when it might have been important. And incidentally, Bill would have been some animal's breakfast. I mean, he can't run so fast either, but. In any event, we are lucky. I mean, just imagine being born a couple hundred years ago with exactly the same talents and how far they would have taken you then. The average person today lives so much better than the richest person lived 100 or 150 years ago. So I'm lucky in that respect. I was lucky to be born of terrific parents. I was lucky to be raised in Omaha in a great public school system. I got a start here in the first 8 grades. That gave me a foundation that later, when I went off the track a few times, carried me through, because I had a terrific grade school education right here in Omaha at Rose Hill. And one of the reasons I had it, incidentally, is kind of unfortunate, but I had that great education in part because women were being enormously discriminated against. And so a woman at that time could be a teacher, she could be a secretary, she could be a nurse, and that was about it. So you had half the talent pool in the United States limited to just a few jobs. So you had an abundance of talent in those activities like nursing or teaching, because that talent with males was spread across every form of work activity there was, but with women it was concentrated in a few areas, and that benefited me. It's kind of sad because it didn't benefit those teachers, but I was very lucky, and I've really been that way all my life. And what I do is important as what a good teacher does or a good nurse does or something of the sort. I think that's quite questionable. It pays off enormously well in a market economy like the United States, but that's an accident. It didn't have anything to do with any innate ability of mine.
What do you see as the problem, the biggest economic problem facing the youth of today going into the future?
Yeah, I don't think that you're going to have enormous economic problems. I think you will live in a society where the average person lives better by a significant margin than the average one of a generation earlier or 2 generations earlier. That's been the history of this country. It's a marvelous country that way. I mean, when you think of it, we have 4.5% of the world's population, and what's been accomplished here is incredible. 53% of the value of corporations that are publicly traded in the world exists in the United States with 4.5% of the population. This country always has done well. They say in stocks that you should buy stock in a business that's so good that even an idiot can run it, because sooner or later one will. And that's not terrible advice. Well, that seems to have been sort of the history of this country from time to time. I mean, we've had all these problems that have come along. If you look back on the last 100 years and list all the problems this country's run into, you know, you can make a very long list. And a lot of people who focused on those problems at the time have missed the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that every generation lives better than the one before it. And that's because of savings, because savings enable people to create new tools to do better things as they go along. And it's also due to an environment that lets people realize their potential to a greater degree than most other environments in the world. It's far from perfect. I mean, it's sad how far it is from perfect, but it is better than anything else around. I mean, in this country, you don't have some commissar or something running a big business in this country. You've got a guy like Jack Welch, and a fellow like Jack Welch makes a difference of night and day in terms of the productivity of that business over a period of decades. And productivity is what causes the standard of living to rise. So a system that throws up the Jack Welches of the world to run businesses is going to have an enormous advantage over a society that does it by heredity or that does it by government edict. And we're closer to that society that I've described than any other country, and it's led to great things, and it will continue to lead to great things. So I think you've got the best future. You know, you don't face a war. You've got a better future in terms of achieving material rewards than any generation in history. So I wish I could trade you places. I might get taken up on that by a few of you, though.
To what extent do you feel that the government, with the current policies of welfare and Social Security, is it financially competent and fiscally prepared for the future?
Well, I think that the country as a whole is quite well prepared for the future. That doesn't mean I would adopt every policy they have. But I think, we have an enormously rich society, and it'll get richer. Everyone isn't going to participate in that. Some won't participate because of physical disabilities, others because of mental disabilities, others because of shortcomings in the education they received when they were growing up, all kinds of reasons. We have a prosperous enough society to be able to take care of those people, and we should take care of them. And how we do it so that they feel most useful in life, and how we do it so that we continue to encourage people to be more productive themselves and all that. I mean, those are not easy questions, but that shouldn't take our eye off the ball of feeling we should do something about it. I pose this problem sometimes to people. I say, let's assume that it's 24 hours before you're born. And all of you can take this test, 24 hours before you're born. And a genie comes to you. And the genie says, we'll call you Joe. And the genie says, Joe, says, you look pretty promising to me. I think you've got kind of a sense of fair play and a good mind. And so I'm going to let you have an extraordinary opportunity. I'm going to let you design the world into which you're going to be born in 24 hours. It's yours. You pick out the political rules, you pick out the economic rules, you pick out the social rules. You design the world. And when you're born in 24 hours, you're going to be born into that world. And that's the world that's going to exist for your lifetime, for your children's lifetime, for your grandchildren's lifetime. And you, having heard of some of these genie jokes in the past, would say, what's the catch? The genie said, well, it's a very slight catch. I said, when you're born in 24 hours, you're going to emerge in this world you designed. But what you don't know is whether you're going to be born black or white, male or female, rich or poor, bright or retarded, able-bodied or infirm, in the United States or Afghanistan. All you know is that you're going to reach into this barrel, which now has 6 billion balls, as we know, representing one person, every person in the world, and you're going to participate in what I call the ovarian lottery. You're going to take one ball out of that barrel, and you're never going to get another ball. That's you. You're going to get one ball, and now you're going to emerge. Now, what kind of rules do you want to have for that society, not knowing which ball you're going to get? Now, that I put to you is the way I think people should think about social policy. And if you're lucky enough to be born in this country, you've won the lottery already. But we should have a system, in my view, that encourages the Jack Welches and the Bill Gateses and all of that to work far beyond the time when it has any economic significance to them. We want people commanding those resources who are extremely able at commanding them. That's how the standard of living moves forward. So we should want Tom Osborne coaching in Nebraska. We should want Bill Gates designing software, and we don't want to mix up those two. We don't want to get Bill coaching in Nebraska. So you want a system that gets people to their potential and puts them in the position where they can do the most good for society. But you also want a system for the people who get the wrong ball. I mean, somebody's going to get the ball, that says 80 IQ. Somebody's going to get the ball that says this disease or that disease early in life that cripples them. And we've got a rich enough society that we can take care of those people. And I think that, to get back to your question, I think that this society will move more and more in that direction. It has the capability of moving more and more in that direction as our resources and our output increases. And I think that it has the will to do that in a general way, although, like I say, there have always been lots of fits and starts. So there is no shortage in the United States of resources. There's no shortage of output. You have to have a system that encourages people to behave to the limit of their abilities and puts them in the right place. But then you have to make sure that everybody gets taken care of, too.
And so I'll summarize Buffett's teachings in likening them to this ancient adage of with great power comes great responsibility, where if you've had the opportunity to get yourself into a fortunate position, then you have great power and responsibility to be able to help others also get ahead. And with that, if you enjoyed this video or learned something, please like and subscribe, and I wish you well on your journey to financial success. Till next time.